Eric Lawson always believed the most dangerous moments in life rarely arrived with noise. They came quietly, with smiles, with good news, with words that sounded like happiness, and sometimes with 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. He woke earlier than usual that morning, long before his alarm. Not because of work, not because of stress, because his wife was coming home. For almost a month, the house had felt different. Too orderly, too silent. Like a hotel room instead of a home. He had filled the time with routines, work, gym, late emails, but none of it replaced the small background noise of another person existing beside you. That morning, he made coffee twice just to make sure it was fresh. Straightened things that were already straight. Folded her favorite gray blanket over the armchair the way she always did, even though nobody would have noticed the difference. Small things people do when they want everything to feel normal again. At 7:46 a.m., he heard the sound of the lock turning. The door opened. Clara stepped inside, pulling her suitcase behind her. Travel fatigue showed in her posture, but when she saw him, her face softened immediately. Eric crossed the hallway without hesitation and wrapped his arms around her. "Welcome home." She leaned into him like someone who needed the pause. "It's good to be back." For a few seconds, everything felt exactly right again. Familiar. Safe. Predictable. Then she stepped back, reached into her bag, and changed everything. She held out a small white plastic stick in her hand. "I have news." Eric looked from her face to the test and back again, his brain taking a second longer than usual to process what he was seeing. "I'm pregnant," she said softly. The words hung between them. Not heavy, just life-changing. "Are you serious?" He wasn't even sure what emotion came first. Shock, happiness, fear, all mixed together. Clara laughed through a small tear forming in the corner of her eye. "We're going to be parents." She squeezed his hand. "This is something good." And it should have been that simple. It should have been pure happiness. But Eric had spent nearly a decade working in corporate risk evaluation. His entire career was built on identifying problems hidden inside good news. And one small detail quietly refused to settle in his mind. They hadn't been close recently. Not before her trip. Not in the way couples usually were before finding out something like this. The timeline wasn't impossible, but it wasn't clean either. He mentioned it carefully, gently, like someone checking the temperature of water before stepping in. Clara didn't get defensive. She smiled. Said stress affected timing. Said travel disrupted cycles. Said biology didn't run on perfect schedules. Said they would confirm everything with her doctor soon. Reasonable answers. Logical answers. Answers that should have been enough. Eric nodded. But reassurance and certainty were not always the same thing. 30 minutes later, he left for work carrying 2 emotions at the same time. Excitement, and a question he couldn't quite explain. At the office, he tried to focus. Contracts needed review. Meetings needed preparation. Emails needed answers. But his thoughts kept drifting backward. Back to the night everything between them had started. 6 years earlier. A corporate celebration at a glass-walled hotel downtown after his promotion to strategy director. The kind of event where everyone pretended they weren't comparing careers while doing exactly that. That was where he first saw Clara. She was standing near the bar talking to someone Eric knew very well, Max Reed. Sharp, ambitious, highly competitive, the kind of man who treated every professional interaction like a silent contest. Max had always compared himself to Eric. Promotions, recognition, leadership visibility. If Eric advanced, Max needed to prove he could advance faster. That night, Max was telling a story loudly, describing a project's success as if he alone had carried it. His hand rested casually on Clara's arm like he was presenting a trophy he had already won. Eric noticed something immediately. Max was trying to impress her, and Clara was slowly getting bored. Max talked about future titles, future income, future power. Plans for the future spoken out loud like they were already guaranteed. Clara kept smiling politely, but her attention was fading. When Max finally stepped away to greet senior management, Eric approached with a simple observation. "Does he ever take a break from competing?" She laughed immediately. "Is it that obvious?" That was the real beginning. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just 2 people discovering they preferred sincerity over performance. They talked easily after that. About books, about travel mistakes, about office politics they both found ridiculous. Eric didn't try to impress her, and that seemed to impress her more. Before the evening ended, they exchanged numbers. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became weekends. Weekends became routines. And routines slowly became a shared life. Sitting now at his desk years later, Eric found himself remembering something else. Something he hadn't thought about in a long time. Max had taken unusual interest when Eric and Clara started dating. Small comments, careful questions, jokes that weren't entirely jokes. At the time, Eric had written it off as ego. Now he wasn't completely sure, because experience had taught him something uncomfortable. Serious problems rarely begin with obvious warnings. They begin with small irregularities, minor inconsistencies, details that technically make sense, but emotionally don't. Eric closed his laptop slowly. For the first time that day, excitement wasn't the strongest feeling anymore. Curiosity was. And curiosity, he knew from experience, was often the first step toward answers people were not ready to hear. Eric Lawson had never been the kind of man who rushed into relationships. He analyzed, he observed, he made decisions slowly. But with Clara, things had felt different from the beginning. Effortless, like finding the right answer before you even finished the question. She was thoughtful in ways that mattered. She remembered small details, asked about his difficult projects, not just the victories. She made him feel understood. And that was rare. After 14 months together, Eric realized something that surprised even him. He didn't want to date her. He wanted to build a life with her. The proposal wasn't elaborate. No audience, no photographer, no rehearsed speech. Just a quiet evening near the harbor after dinner. City lights reflecting on the water, boats rocking gently against their lines. He took her hand and asked. She didn't hesitate. Her smile answered before her words did. Yes. That was the moment he believed stability wasn't just something he built at work. It was something he had finally found at home. After the wedding, they bought a small townhouse on the north side of the city. Nothing extravagant, but it was theirs. They painted walls together, argued about furniture placement, spent entire Saturdays fixing things that weren't broken just because they enjoyed building something together. Some evenings they sat on their small patio drinking tea and talking about future plans. Children, travel, growing older without growing apart. The kind of conversations people have when they believe time is on their side. And Eric remembered all of it now, especially the certainty he had felt back then, because certainty made doubt feel much heavier. The romantic dinner Clara prepared 2 days after announcing the pregnancy almost worked. Candles, his favorite pasta, sparkling water instead of wine for her. She seemed lighter, happier, more affectionate than usual. He wanted to believe everything was exactly what it looked like. After dinner, she took his hand and suggested they go upstairs. When he hesitated slightly, mentioning the pregnancy, she laughed softly. "I already asked the doctor," she said it casually. "Everything is fine." It sounded reassuring. It should have ended the concern. And yet something about how quickly she answered stayed with him. Too smooth, too prepared. Like she expected the question before he asked it. They went to bed. Eric told himself trust mattered more than fear. For 2 days, he almost believed it. And then Clara came home from another appointment. "I have an update," she said, smiling. "The doctor thinks I'm about 4 weeks pregnant." Eric felt something cold settle in his stomach. Not panic, calculation. 4 weeks. His brain did the math automatically. Dates, travel, distance. He knew exactly where he had been 4 weeks earlier, and it hadn't been with her. He brought it up carefully. Not accusing, just confused. Clara didn't pause. "It happened," she said confidently. "You probably just forgot." Forgot? Eric didn't respond immediately, because forgetting something like that didn't match his personality. His entire career depended on remembering details other people missed. But he nodded anyway. Sometimes people nod when they need more time to think. The next week, something else happened. At first, it just felt like irritation. Physical discomfort he assumed was stress-related. Maybe nothing. But it didn't go away. So he scheduled a medical check without mentioning it to Clara. Just to eliminate possibilities. Just to be responsible. The results arrived 3 days later, and removed all remaining comfort. Eric sat in his car reading the report twice before starting the engine. Then once more. Because denial sometimes needs repetition. The diagnosis was simple. clear, and impossible to misunderstand. A sexually transmitted infection. Eric didn't move for almost 2 minutes, because the conclusion didn't require interpretation. If the timeline was correct, there was only one explanation, and it wasn't one he wanted to accept. That was the moment suspicion stopped being theoretical and became real. Clara left early one morning for errands. Eric stood in the kitchen for a long time after the door closed. He wasn't proud of what he was considering, but doubt changes the rules people live by. He opened her laptop, not aggressively, carefully, like someone hoping not to find anything. Emails, travel confirmations, routine messages, nothing obvious. Until he found the conference itinerary from her recent business trip. He almost skipped it. Almost. Then one familiar name pulled his attention back. Max Reed. Eric felt his jaw tighten. He hadn't heard that name in years. Max had left his company after losing an internal promotion battle. Eric had assumed he moved industries. Apparently not. Max wasn't just attending the same conference. He was listed as part of the same project group, working directly with Clara. Eric leaned back slowly in the chair, memory filled in details he hadn't considered important before. Max's interest when Eric started dating Clara, the subtle competitiveness, the questions disguised as casual curiosity. Back then, it had seemed like ego. Now it looked different. Now it looked like unfinished business. And Eric knew something else about competitive people. They rarely forget losses, and they rarely ignore opportunities to rebalance the score. Eric closed the laptop carefully, because now 3 separate facts existed. A pregnancy timeline that didn't fully align, a medical result that shouldn't exist, an arrival from his past suddenly reappearing in his present. Individually, they might mean nothing. Together, they meant something else. Eric didn't know the full truth yet, but for the first time he was certain of one thing. This was no longer just a doubt. This was a pattern, and patterns he knew from experience always led somewhere. Sometimes to answers, sometimes to damage, and sometimes to both. Eric Lawson did not confront Clara immediately. Not because he was weak, because he needed to be certain. Years of risk analysis had taught him one rule above all others: never act on emotion when facts are still incomplete. So he watched, quietly, carefully. And once he started paying attention, small things began to change shape. The first thing he noticed was her phone. Not something obvious, something subtle. Clara had never been secretive with it before. She would leave it on the kitchen counter, on the couch, sometimes even on his desk if she needed both hands. Now it was always face down, always within reach, always on silent. Once, when a message appeared while they were eating dinner, she flipped the screen toward herself so quickly it almost looked like a reflex. "Work," she said casually. Eric nodded, but he had seen enough corporate messages in his life to recognize something different. Work messages didn't make people hide smiles. The second change was her schedule: new meetings, last-minute calls, extra preparation for projects she had never mentioned before. All reasonable, all explainable. But frequency matters, and patterns matter, and Eric was very good at recognizing patterns. The first real crack came on a Thursday evening. Clara was in the shower when her phone lit up on the nightstand. Eric wasn't trying to spy, not at first, but one name froze him where he stood. Max. Just the name. No last name, no emoji. Just Max. Did you tell him? Eric didn't touch the phone, didn't unlock it, didn't scroll. He didn't need to, because one question answered another question he hadn't wanted to ask directly. Tell him what? When Clara came out of the bathroom, Eric was already sitting on the bed reading, exactly where she expected him to be. She picked up the phone immediately. Too immediately. A microsecond too fast. Years of negotiation meetings had trained Eric to notice reaction timing. That was not casual behavior. That was damage control. The psychological pressure started building after that. Not loudly, quietly. The way pressure builds inside structures before anything cracks. Eric found himself studying conversations. Tone shifts, eye contact, response delays. He wasn't proud of it. But once doubt enters a relationship, observation becomes automatic. One night she mentioned Max casually, too casually. "Oh, I forgot to mention, Max is helping with our logistics planning now." Eric kept his voice neutral. "From your old company?" She hesitated. "Just half a second." Yeah, small world. Small world. Eric smiled politely, but he remembered something Clara didn't know he remembered. Max hadn't just worked at his old company. Max had competed directly against him and lost. Eric didn't hire a private investigator immediately. He tried something else first: verification. He checked public professional profiles, company announcements, conference records, and Max was exactly where Clara said he was, working with her. That alone meant nothing. But context changes meaning. The first almost mistake happened on a Sunday. Clara left her laptop open while making coffee. Eric wasn't planning to look. Then a message notification appeared in the corner. Max again. Just one line visible before it disappeared. Max, I missed last week already. Eric closed the laptop gently. Exactly the way it had been. Because reacting too early closes doors. And Eric needed doors open. That was when he decided observation wasn't enough. Preparation mattered too. He scheduled a consultation with a lawyer, not a divorce lawyer, a precaution lawyer, someone who helped executives prepare for worst-case scenarios before they happened. Her name was Laura Bennett. Efficient, direct, not dramatic. He explained only facts, timeline inconsistencies, medical results, behavior changes. She didn't interrupt. When he finished, she said something simple. Right now you don't have proof, but you do have risk exposure. Risk exposure. Language he understood. Her advice wasn't cinematic. No secret accounts, no movie strategies, just practical steps. Document everything. Separate personal finances carefully. Avoid joint liabilities. Keep communication civil. Do nothing aggressive yet. Preparation is not an accusation, she told him. It's insurance. That made sense to Eric. Insurance always felt rational. Over the next 2 weeks, Eric became very good at pretending everything was normal. Dinner conversations stayed light. He asked about her day. He listened. He smiled. And he watched. Clara became slightly more affectionate, which should have felt reassuring. Instead, it felt like someone was compensating, overcorrecting, trying to stabilize something invisible. The confirmation that something real was happening came from an unexpected place. Not Clara, not Max. A calendar notification. One evening, Clara mentioned she had a late planning session. Eric nodded. Later that night, while updating a shared household calendar, he noticed something strange. The meeting she mentioned wasn't listed, not moved, not renamed, just absent. When he asked casually later, she answered quickly. It was informal. Informal. Eric nodded. But informal meetings rarely lasted 4 hours. The real turning point came 3 days later. Eric was leaving his office building when he saw something he hadn't expected. Across the street, outside a small wine bar, Clara and Max. Not touching, not obviously intimate, but standing closer than colleagues usually do when nobody's watching. Max said something that made her laugh. Not polite laughter. Real laughter. The kind Eric hadn't heard from her in weeks. Eric didn't approach them, didn't call, didn't react. He simply watched for 10 seconds, then walked away. Because sometimes confirmation doesn't need confrontation. Sometimes seeing is enough. That night, Clara came home and kissed him like nothing had happened. Eric kissed her back. Because now he understood something important. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was strategy. And strategy required timing. Later that night, while Clara slept beside him, Eric stared at the ceiling, realizing something that changed his approach completely. The most dangerous part wasn't the possible betrayal. It was how prepared she seemed. And that meant he needed to be more prepared. Because if this really was what it looked like, the next phase wouldn't be emotional. It would be structural. And Eric intended to be ready before that moment arrived. Eric Lawson didn't rush. That was the biggest difference between anger and strategy. Anger reacts. Strategy waits. And Eric had moved completely into strategy. The first hard evidence arrived almost by accident. Not from spying, not from confrontation, from biology. Eric had scheduled a second medical consultation after receiving his diagnosis. Not because he doubted it, because he needed clarity. The doctor asked a simple question. Has your partner been tested? Eric didn't answer immediately, then asked something else instead. If someone is pregnant, would this show up? The doctor nodded. Yes, standard prenatal panels would detect it. That was the moment Eric understood something important. If Clara really believed the child was his, she would eventually be forced to explain the medical contradiction. And that meant time was no longer on her side. The emotional pressure started changing Clara too. Eric noticed it. She became more attentive, more affectionate, more careful with words, like someone trying to maintain balance on unstable ground. One evening she asked suddenly, "Are you okay? You've been distant." Eric smiled. Work stress, deadlines, nothing unusual. She watched him for a second longer than usual, like she was trying to read something he wasn't showing. That was the first moment Eric realized something uncomfortable. She was also watching him. The almost confession came a week later. Clara started talking about the future. Nursery colors, possible names, school districts, plans built on assumptions. At one point she said quietly, "I just want us to be stable." Us. Eric felt the word land differently, because now he wasn't sure who she included in that sentence. The breaking point began with something small, a receipt. Eric wasn't searching, he was doing laundry, and a folded receipt slipped from Clara's jacket pocket. A restaurant bill, 2 meals, 2 glasses of wine, a date from a night she had told him she was working late. Eric stared at it for a long time, not because it proved everything, because it proved enough. That was the moment hope started losing ground to reality. The confrontation almost happened that night. Almost. Eric sat across from her at dinner studying her face while she talked about something insignificant. Normal voice, normal behavior, normal life continuing over a situation that wasn't normal anymore. He almost said, "Who were you really with?" Almost. But almost doesn't change outcomes. Timing does. So he waited. The psychological breaking point didn't arrive with shouting. It arrived with silence. Eric started sleeping less, not dramatically, just enough. Clara noticed, asked again if something was wrong. Eric said no, because sometimes the strongest move is letting the other person wonder what you know. The real evidence came 3 days later. The private investigator Eric had finally hired sent a short message. "We need to talk. No explanation. Just that." They met in a quiet office. No drama. Just a folder placed on the table. Photos, timestamps, locations. Nothing explicit. No kissing. No hotel rooms. Something more damaging. Consistency. Multiple meetings. Private dinners. Long walks. Familiar body language. 2 people who didn't look like colleagues anymore. They looked comfortable. Too comfortable. The investigator spoke carefully. "I can't prove an affair." Pause. "But I can say this is not typical professional interaction." Eric nodded slowly, because confirmation rarely looks like movies. It looks like patterns. That night, Eric sat alone in his car for almost an hour. Not crying, not angry, just adjusting to reality. Because there is a moment when suspicion becomes acceptance, and acceptance changes everything. When he came home, Clara was already asleep, one hand resting over her stomach. Eric stood in the doorway for a long moment, because this was the part nobody prepares you for, not the betrayal. The memory of what you believed before the betrayal. He remembered proposing, painting walls together, talking about children. All of it is still real, just no longer current. The pre-explosion tension arrived the next morning. Clara asked casually, "Do you trust me?" Eric didn't answer immediately, not because he didn't know, because he did. And saying it would change everything. So he gave the only answer that was still technically true. "I trust what I can verify." She didn't respond, but something in her expression shifted. Fear. Not guilt. Fear. And Eric understood something in that moment. She knew the timeline was collapsing. That was the moment Eric made his final decision. Not emotional. Structural. He met with his lawyer again, prepared documentation, separated finances legally, protected future exposure. Not revenge. Containment. Because Eric wasn't trying to win. He was trying not to lose more. The final pressure came unexpectedly. 2 nights later, Clara's phone rang after midnight. She didn't answer, but Eric saw the name before the screen went dark. Max. No more doubts now. Just confirmation waiting for timing. Eric didn't say anything, because now everything depended on one last thing. When the truth finally surfaced, would she admit it? Or would she try to hold the story together until it broke on its own? Eric already knew one thing for certain. The next conversation would end the marriage. He just didn't know yet whether it would end quietly or completely. Eric did not plan the confrontation. It simply became unavoidable. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening. No dramatic setup, no raised voices, no theatrical reveal. Just two people sitting across from each other, knowing something had already ended. Clara sensed it immediately. People always do. "What is it?" she asked quietly. Eric placed a small envelope on the table. Not aggressively, not emotionally, just final. Inside were printed photos, timestamps, a restaurant receipt, medical results. No speech, no accusations, just reality organized into evidence. Clara didn't touch the envelope at first. Her face lost color slowly, like someone watching a storm they knew was coming finally arrive. "How much do you know?" she asked. Eric answered honestly. "Enough." Silence filled the room. Longer this time. He didn't ask if she cheated. He didn't ask if the child was his. He asked something else. "How long?" That question broke something. Not anger, control. Tears appeared immediately, but not dramatically. Quietly. Like someone finally too tired to maintain a story. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she whispered. And that was the closest thing to a confession. The truth didn't come out all at once. It came in fragments. Max had contacted her after reconnecting professionally. Old attraction, work stress, feeling unseen. Bad decisions disguised as emotional support. Nothing unusual, nothing special. Just the same story that destroys thousands of relationships every year. One bad boundary, then another, then a point of no return. "I thought I could fix it before you found out," she said. That sentence hurt more than anything else. Not the betrayal, the strategy. Eric listened, not because he needed details, because this was the last time she would ever explain anything to him. "Is the child mine?" That was the only question that mattered now. Clara couldn't answer immediately, and that was the answer. The emotional collapse came quietly. No screaming. Just two people sitting in the ruins of something they once believed was permanent. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said. Eric nodded slowly. "I believe that." And he did. Because most damage isn't done by people trying to destroy something. It's done by people trying to have everything. The unexpected twist came a week later. Clara tried to build something with Max after Eric filed for separation. But Max wasn't interested anymore. Without the secrecy, without the competition, without the possibility of winning. There was nothing left motivating him. According to a mutual contact, his exact words were, "I thought she was smarter." That was when Clara realized something too late. She hadn't left one relationship for another. She had fallen between both. The divorce itself was quiet. No scandals, no revenge. Just signatures. Two lives separating legally long after they had separated emotionally. Eric didn't try to destroy her financially. He didn't need to. Consequences were already doing that work. 2 years passed. Time did what time always does. It didn't erase anything. It just reduced the emotional volume. Clara raised her son with help from her family. Life became practical, structured around responsibility instead of dreams. She tried dating again once, then stopped. Because trust, once broken inside yourself, is harder to rebuild than trust broken with someone else. Sometimes the hardest forgiveness is forgiving your past decisions. Eric built something different. Not a new relationship, a new life structure. He started traveling alone, hiking, climbing, recording his trips just to document progress. At first it was therapy, then it became something else. An audience found him, people who related to rebuilding, to starting over, to quiet resilience. His small travel channel slowly grew, not because of drama, because of honesty. He adopted a rescue dog that followed him everywhere, loyal, predictable, simple. The kind of trust that doesn't require explanation. One evening, almost 3 years after everything ended, Eric noticed a comment under one of his videos. No name he recognized, but he knew immediately. "I'm sorry for everything. I didn't understand what I was destroying until it was gone. I hope you're happy now." He read it twice. Pain didn't come back. Anger didn't come back. That was how he knew he had actually healed. He replied simply, I hope you find peace too. Nothing more. Because closure isn't a conversation. It's a state. Eric closed his laptop and sat quietly for a moment, not thinking about betrayal anymore, not thinking about loss, thinking about something he had learned too late to save his marriage, but early enough to save himself. Trust is not proven by words. It is proven by consistency. And when consistency disappears, the truth usually isn't far behind. Some people think the worst part of betrayal is losing someone you loved. It isn't. The worst part is realizing you ignored the moment your intuition tried to protect you. And the strongest people aren't the ones who never get betrayed. They're the ones who learn to trust themselves again afterward. If this story made you feel something, hit that like button. Drop a comment telling us what you would have done in the main character's place. And subscribe to Sinner Stories so you never miss a new video.